today's question is how to get into role play without being embarrassed. I have been fantasizing incessantly about role play, doing some text-based flirting. I really want to get into the role play, but I just clam up. Is it performance anxiety? Especially since I'm trying to be a sexy primal alien queen that's interbreeding, which is the role play. But she can't help feel shy and embarrassed at pretending. And she then goes on to say, I could never get into school plays back in the day either. So again, the question is, how do you get into role play without being embarrassed?
That's a great question. And I think more than anything else, this highlights the flaw in the Emily Nagoski come as you are nonsense version of eroticism, which is if you just have enough trust and comfort, then it'll all magically work out. You just need more trust and more comfort, right? Unfortunately, that's building up the wrong side of the relationship. There's always two aspects in a relationship. There's closeness and there's intimacy. And they are actually in tension with each other. They are pulling in opposite directions. They're both necessary to a relationship. They're both important to a relationship, but they are in fact opposites. And they need to be held in some sort of balance. Denying that gets you into a ton of trouble. And I think a lot of the advice this person may get is, well, you need to build more communication, more trust, more security, and that will go in exactly the wrong direction. The issue is she's having trouble with intimacy, not closeness. And intimacy is the ability to authentically inhabit yourself. So this fantasy, this role, what she needs is a childlike intimacy of playing a role. The example I give in the book, and I've talked about in other podcasts, is a child says, oh, I want to be the Red Power Ranger. And you can't be the Red Power Ranger because I'm already the Red Power Ranger, and that's not how it works. There aren't two. That's not the system. That's not the rules, and they really feel it. And there will be tears if somebody tries to mess with the game because they're really in it. The child's not delusional. It's not like they don't know it's a fantasy. They know they're playing make-believe, but they play it with all their heart. They play it all the way. And that is the bit she's missing, is she has lost touch with that playful side of herself, what Vervaeke might call the Gnostic side, where she's able to actually ritualistically embrace that feeling of what would it be like to be this primal being and to truly inhabit that space. Yes, to some degree it gets better with practice, right? But not necessarily with your partner. This is a personal problem. Her partner cannot help her here. Her partner cannot make her feel more safe. Her partner cannot encourage her or any of those things. She points at this, I could never get into school plays back in the day either. She has an overly dominant persona. Her persona is trumping her shadow, and she can't let go of the social being, the public side of herself, in order to have the intimate, personal shadow side of herself, and that's where she's struggling.
That is very well put. She has a very strong persona. That's an excellent way of putting it, I think. Very much also the case, I agree with you completely. The issue at hand here is the inability of this person to get into a sort of playful state, right? And that's a modern world problem, right? Because we think, oh, we're this person, we go to this job, and this is how we are with everybody, right? And like you said, a persona, right? That's codified by society and put in place over there. And thinking that's the only dimension to you that you have, and there's like really nothing else. And that, try to slip that cloak off, if only in play, if only in these sort of kinky dynamics, is somehow inauthentic to who you actually are, right? And so part of the problem also is she's not fully embracing, right? So one of the other things about that analogy, a really good analogy you made about the Power Rangers, is that kid really wanted to be the Power Ranger, right? At the cost even of looking silly, right? Because as you get older, the sense of, oh, this is just silly, right? I don't want to be engaged in silly. You sort of grow out of it, right? But that kid, the concept of this is just a stupid game doesn't even occur to them, right? That everything is just all play all the time. And so, that's a good way of putting it, is you are probably holding on too much to your persona, and you just have to break through.
And there are ways of getting around it. It's interesting she brings up these high school plays. So for instance, I still do this, by the way, in the privacy of my own home, right? I live alone, whatever, but I've always loved the play Macbeth. And I will recite lines from Macbeth, because it helps me inhabit the archetype of the warrior king, to feel that real nature that is the gravitas of that. So lay on Macduff, and damned be him that first cries, hold, enough.
As one
does. But that, to me, is that notion. There's a direct connection there to my ability to inhabit that king archetype when I'm being kinky, because I have inhabited that archetype for myself. When I see these kingly roles that I resonate with, I try them on as a child would, right? And I say, what would it be like to push oneself to the brink, to perceive that the entire world is against me, all the prophecies are against me, and yet go fuck yourself, right? And that ability, we see that in Marvel movies with young men. We see that in all these different ways. We're trying on those roles. She could do this at home by herself, find some time or anywhere to take it out of text. Text is a great start. Nothing wrong with that. Even without her partner being there, because being watched triggers that persona. It triggers the closeness. It triggers the constant compromise of any good relationship. The negotiation of, well, I'll be some version of myself that's a little easier to take than the real version of myself. And kink is the opposite, is no, you're going to get the primal alien queen who wants to breed you, right? Like that, you're not getting the easy version of me. But she doesn't know how to be that because she hasn't done it even with herself. And so having an opportunity to go back and feel, how would this person communicate? How would they move? How would they walk? What would it feel like to inhabit the body of that alien queen? How would she speak? What tone would she use? All of that. And a great one, actually, if you're looking for an alien queen, is Star Trek First Contact. The Borg queen has a phenomenal seductiveness about her. And you can actually look at that movie and try to imitate, say those lines, and feel what it feels like to move and think that way.
Another way to approach this, and then this was my approach, because I don't know that I was particularly open to the idea of play. And my whole getting into kink was not thinking about deepening play, but it was more about understanding that the rituals, these sort of ceremonial rituals where people put on robes and they chant things and there's smoke and all this stuff, right? There are all these rituals that humans have in spiritual traditions, that they are actually serving an important role, right? You talked about this sort of like you're inhabiting this sort of dream space for a while, right? You are situating yourself in a certain metaphor, for example, by enacting these rituals, these sort of enacted analogies, and then recognizing that to view them as only silly superstitions and superficial nonsense was an error of my thinking, right? That there is something very basic, core, and fundamental that's transformative in these rituals, right? And so I really looked at kink play as a ritualized play, not kink play. I thought of kink as a ritual in and of itself. And yes, it's enacted through this play thing. But another way of getting at the problem or a mental block that she may have is to have a greater appreciation for the importance of ritual in human affairs, right? And if you were to look at kink as a ritualized way of being with another person, right? So something that has rules and structure and order, but it's not quite your normal world, all of the tenets of a ritual, that might make it a bit more palatable, right? And then there's no sort of sense of being embarrassed. I mean, think about people go to church every Sunday in the morning wearing their finest, and then some guy gets on an altar, he says words in Latin, and then there might be smoke. I mean, all of it superficially seems silly, right? If you've never done it before in your life, right? You've never been in a church, you're like, what do I do now, right? It all seems arbitrary and silly, and if you've never engaged in that, it might just seem stupid too. Sure. But if you understand that ritual does have a role in human affairs, this might be another way of looking at it too.
Yeah, and oddly enough, one of the things that's very common in kink relationships is having certain rituals, particularly at times of transition. So in my relationships, for instance, one of the big ones is when you come home. A ritual of coming home and taking off the persona and saying, okay, yeah, I'm not going to be that responsible adult anymore because now I'm home and I'm the king of this domain and my word is law. And so I'm not negotiating because I have to negotiate with my boss, or I have to negotiate with my customers, or I have to be a person. I have to be a responsible and decent and compromising human being. And then I walk in the door and my slave will do as I command. I just have to inhabit that role. But that's a transition, and rituals can be very helpful with making that transition. And similarly for her, I think getting into the play would benefit from having some sort of ritual of transition. However, for her personally, based on her description, I think the problem goes a little deeper. I don't think she knows how to be in that space even for herself. And so she has to figure that out first.